Alright, what's happening? Y'all, it's your boy Rico from Street Scores. I know I'm late, but this news came out like right before I had to leave out the house, and I had all of my notes ready, and then I ran out of time before I had to go. Brody and Aja, as you see on the screen, well, that's actually not Brody right there, but you'll see him eventually. Y'all know Brody and Aja. I had to go and get their shots done, and it was like a 40-minute drive away. So I had all of my notes ready. I watched all of my Arizona Cardinals tape that I felt like I needed to watch to be prepared to talk about everything that I need to in this video. And then as soon as I was ready, I looked up and it was time to go. So now I know I'm late, but we're here to dive into the potential of Cliff Kingsbury being the leading candidate for the Washington Commanders. Also, is Caleb Williams more likely to be drafted by the Washington Commanders because of this? Also, is Eagles Brian Johnson in the running as well? We're going to do a deep dive into the X's and O's of the Cliff Kingsbury air raid offense, of course. We're going to look at the weaknesses and strengths of this offense. And is this Cliff Kingsbury air raid system more of a floor raiser that gets the most out of bad talent to make them competent? Or is it a ceiling raiser that gets the most out of great talent but is also dependent on said great talent to even be functional? We're going to dive into which one of those it is. Also, I want to do a stock up and stock down on the position groups and position traits of certain position groups that are the most important for a Cliff Kingsbury offense to succeed. Also, a quick dive on why Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, is way better than Cliff Kingsbury, the head coach, and why this actually could potentially be a great hire for us with or without Caleb Williams. And then, of course, again, does us hiring Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator make the Commanders drafting USC quarterback Caleb Williams that much more likely? We'll talk about it, because the Raiders, when it looked like they were potentially going to get him, there were talks about them potentially trading up from the 13th overall pick to the first overall pick. We have the second. So is this actually very possible or even slightly likely? We're going to dive into all of that and more. And of course, let me go ahead and say this before we dive into the video. If we end up hiring him as an offensive coordinator, I'm going to do a way deeper dive. Like, it's going to be a straight up film session where I show you things on the screen and stuff like that. I'll show you example plays and basically showing you like, okay, when the defense is doing this, this is how Cliff Kingsbury counters that, things like that. So stay tuned for that if we end up hiring him. But before we dive into all of that, make sure you stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, and stiff arm the bell next to that subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one, man. I really appreciate all of y'all for being patient with me. I'm trying my best to try to read and reply to as many things as possible. And again, I'm late with coming out with this video, so stay patient with me. Just super busy, but I'm doing everything that I can to still get y'all all of the content. We're still going to do live streams, call-in shows, all of that. I'm working on a mock draft very soon, especially after we just hired Dan Quinn. Hopefully I can get that out before we end up officially hiring like a Cliff Kingsbury, so I can do another mock draft that's based on what Cliff Kingsbury may want to do in the draft, because that's probably going to be pretty different from what Dan Quinn wants to do as well. So make sure y'all stay tuned for all of that. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get to this video instead of wasting more of y'all time. Let's get it. All right, so background information before we dive into what this offense is, and even just Cliff Kingsbury himself as a head coach, offensive coordinator, all that type of stuff, his time in college, his time at the NFL. Cliff Kingsbury has withdrawn from the Raiders offensive coordinator search. Cliff Kingsbury, 44, spent the past season at USC in an advisory role. But most importantly, the thing I want to point out is that everybody was saying that him going to the Raiders looked like a done deal. I don't know what happened. Apparently, contract negotiations became undone in the last 24 hours, and Cliff Kingsbury withdrew his name from consideration. So whatever numbers they were talking, apparently he wasn't rocking with it. He didn't like it, and he said that, yeah, he's ready to move on. He let multiple members of the Raiders organization know that he would not be joining the team yesterday. Again, that looked like a closed deal. Cliff Kingsbury going to the Raiders official is all about the numbers, and somehow the numbers just didn't add up to him for some reason. And then Adam Schefter said former Cardinals head coach Cliff Kingsbury, who was close to becoming the Raiders offensive coordinator, is now a leading candidate to become the Commanders offensive coordinator. Not the, but A leading. I want to emphasize that because Sam Fortier pointed out Cliff Kingsbury is expected to be in play for the Commanders offensive coordinator job. Washington is still going through the process and things could still take time. So maybe they really like him, but they're going to do their due diligence and make sure they interview several people. It's not like, oh, Cliff Kingsbury is available, let's go get him right now, forget everybody else, ignore all other interviews. So apparently this is going to take time, but at the same time, on the other side of it, Scott Abram tweeted out, the momentum is real. A league source just confirmed to me that Cliff Kingsbury is a strong candidate to be the next offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders. And if you think about it, the way Albert Breer worded it, when we get to this, I'm about to read that soon, it sounds like we were on it basically as soon as we heard he was available, that as soon as he declined the whole Raider situation, whatever happened with the contracts and stuff like that, that we were one of the first teams to get on it and call him. So we clearly want him. Again, like other reports said, we're going to take our time with the situation, but there's clear interest from our end. I'm just curious about whether or not he's interested in us, because apparently he was looking to go to the Raiders over us, with us both having offensive coordinator openings. I don't know what happened though. But Albert Breer said a contractual hangup led to there being an opening on Cliff Kingsbury, and the Commanders are among the teams that swooped in to try and hire Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator. Cliff to DC is in play. And when he said swooped in to try and hire him, does that mean we already offered him the job and we're just waiting on him to get back with us type of thing? Do we not even need to interview this guy? We don't even need to fly him out to the DMV? What is going on? And don't forget, when everybody else was saying that Ben Johnson to the Commanders and Dan Quinn to the Seahawks was a done deal and most likely to happen, Adam Schefter was the one guy saying, nah, I don't know about that. And even dared to say that both of those may be wrong, and everybody thought he was basically just trying to generate news and clicks and views and things like that. And now look how everything played out. Both of them ended up being wrong. So when he says the Cliff Kingsbury and the Commanders seem to be very likely to happen, I do believe him. So again, nothing is official yet, because again, as close as he got with the Raiders, I'm not gonna act like he's our offensive coordinator or even acknowledge the situation until like it's pen to paper announcement from the Washington Commanders himself. Again, I'm scarred after the whole Caleb Downs thing, what happened with my Georgia Bulldogs, so I gotta see it to believe it. I need pen on paper before we even adjust what we're doing around the fact that he is officially our offensive coordinator. It sounds very likely, but still, he is not officially that yet, so we're gonna move accordingly. Also, the Saints officially went and hired 49ers passing game specialist Clint Kubiak as their offensive coordinator. He looked like he may have been our leading candidate, but even with the Adam Peters ties, he preferred to go with the Saints. And so that opened things up for us. It got ugly, and then of course there was a whole Chip Kelly situation. I already did a full dive into that. Make sure you go tune into that and look at that, because I brought up similar to how we're doing right now with the weaknesses and strengths of the offense, and whether this would be a good idea or not, and why Chip Kelly is potentially a better offensive coordinator than he was ever a head coach. Same thing with Cliff Kingsbury. But I do want to point out the fact that I'm pretty sure a lot of Commanders fans want to avoid Chip Kelly at all costs. Whereas Cliff Kingsbury is a little different, man. Because even though I am interested in the risk of a Chip Kelly, especially after the super safe hire of a Dan Quinn as a head coach, like I would want to go with something like we went safe with head coach. I would like to go a little risky with offensive coordinator. I want to go ceiling rather than floor with offensive coordinator. But Cliff Kingsbury, even though he does come with the ceiling and he is somewhat of a risk, he's easily safer than a Chip Kelly, which is why I feel like a lot of people want to avoid Chip Kelly at all costs. But some of those same people will be willing to give Cliff Kingsbury the chance to see what he could do as an offensive coordinator. But at the same time, he's still a fun and potentially risky experiment. I don't want to act like he's not a risk, but he's nowhere near the risk of a Chip Kelly. I think he would really be fun and explosive for us. I really do. And he's just another case, again, of a head coach and talent evaluation getting in the way of him as the offensive genius. Chip Kelly as the head coach got in the way of Chip Kelly, the offensive coordinator, and the same thing with Cliff Kingsbury. Him being a head coach, having total control like that, got in the way of him doing what he does best, and that's producing yards and points as the offensive genius that he is. So, with either of those guys as just pure offensive coordinators, Adam Peters and Eugene Shin handling the team building, which sounds like, I mean, to me, that combination, I think that could work. Dan Quinn doing all of the head coaching stuff, all of the time management, things like that, timeouts, all of that, making the clutch decisions and things like that. If Cliff Kingsbury, all he has to worry about is just offense and that's it, I think we can work with that. And again, to compare him to Chip Kelly, I think he has a way higher floor, and I think they both have a similar ceiling. And I would take Cliff Kingsbury over Chip Kelly any day. Even though I'm willing to take a chance on the Chip Kelly, I'm taking Cliff Kingsbury any day over Chip Kelly, especially with us potentially having a chance to land a top 2 quarterback between Caleb Williams, Drake May, or Jaden Daniels. I'll easily take Cliff Kingsbury. And again, to my main point about Cliff Kingsbury, let's talk about what went wrong with him. Because Cliff Kingsbury, the head coach, getting in the way of Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive genius, is serious. I mean, it's definitely something that has some fans a little apprehensive about potentially hiring him as an offensive coordinator. But I do want to let you know, as a guy that's already watched a lot of tape, done a dive into his stats and stuff like that, he will be a great offensive coordinator potentially for us. And that's why everybody's coming out and saying that he's probably our leading candidate for offensive coordinator. It would potentially be a smart hire. Chip Kelly's name was thrown out there, but Cliff Kingsbury is being reported as like the head leading candidate. And again, from the way that Albert Breer reported it, it sounds like we're definitely interested in him. It's about whether he's interested in us. And again, with Adam Peters and Eugene Shin controlling everything team building wise, making the decisions as far as free agency and draft, Dan Quinn running the defense and the whole operation from the head coaching side and things like that, and all Cliff Kingsbury has to worry about is the X's and O's. I think that could be a match made in heaven potentially. I think that could make the Dan Quinn hire a little bit easier on a lot of Commanders fans that didn't like it. I think if you bring in the risky, explosive offense, Cliff Kingsbury, the quarterback developer, I think that can make a lot of people really appreciate Dan Quinn a lot more, because you're not bringing in a Cliff Kingsbury if you have an offensive-minded head coach, whereas Dan Quinn is a great defensive coordinator. I mean, we could do a whole dive into that later. We'll talk about that if we end up hiring Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator, because that's a whole nother 30 minutes on how they can be the perfect match made in heaven. Dan Quinn on defense, Cliff Kingsbury on the offense, and how that's like literally perfect for each other. That will be like a whole nother video that, again, I could dive into for like a whole nother 30 minutes. But again, I just want to reemphasize, I like the risk of a Chip Kelly, but I much more prefer a Cliff Kingsbury personally, because I feel like Cliff Kingsbury also comes with that same potential, that same ceiling, that same explosive risk that Chip Kelly has, but he also comes with a way higher floor. Just wanted to keep re-emphasizing that for people. Also, Cliff Kingsbury has created a really unique offense that can adapt to different defensive schemes. I really like that about him, which is something that Chip Kelly showed that he hasn't shown he could do that at the NFL level. Once he caught fire and defenses caught on to that, he never showed that he could counter it. Cliff Kingsbury has shown that he can make mid-season adjustments to his offense and counter what defenses use to counter him. So that's another reason I like Cliff Kingsbury more. He's shown that he can adjust. We haven't seen Chip Kelly adjustments yet. He came onto the scene, was just explosive off the rip. Cliff Kingsbury had similar explosion off the rip and was like, oh man, what is this? Then defenses adjusted to that, and then he adjusted to those defenses. Now let's talk about what went wrong. We're not going to dive into that too long. Maybe we'll do a deeper dive into that if we hire him. But basically, Cliff Kingsbury coached the Cardinals to an 11-6 record in 2022, but Arizona cratered to a 4-13 mark the following year in his fourth and final campaign. The rise and fall of Kyler Murray, selected first in the 2019 draft, weighed heavily in the franchise's success and Kingsbury's subsequent dismissal. So basically, his whole job was attached to whether Kyler Murray could play well, and a lot of it wasn't necessarily even his fault. Kyler Murray was just getting hurt, whatever. And again, Cliff Kingsbury, the talent evaluator and head coach, was getting in the way of Cliff Kingsbury, the offensive coordinator, because he just wasn't doing a great job of putting the best offensive line around Kyler Murray. We're going to talk about that later in this video, about how this offense requires a really good offensive line for it to even be able to function. It's not preferred. No, it's like necessary type of thing. And him as a head coach, he just wasn't doing a great job of putting the best team around Kyler Murray. And between that and Kyler Murray getting hurt, that's why he ended up getting fired. But now let's talk about the offense. Well, first of all, he runs an air raid offense, for those of y'all who may not know. And also, his offense finished 16th, 14th, and 15th before the final year when Kyler Murray got hurt, and his quarterbacks have run for 400 plus yards all 4 seasons and 800 yards even once with Kyler Murray. And so you're gonna need a dual threat quarterback, and that's what I'm pretty sure the majority of our fan base wants, and a lot of these top quarterbacks are dual threat, so Cliff Kingsbury can have the right offense to get the most out of any of the 3 quarterbacks if we take either one of them. Now, of course, Drake May is the least mobile out of the 3, but I would argue that Drake May still has very underrated mobility. A lot of people keep acting like he's just this statue in the pocket. He's very mobile. I think he's like a slightly less strong but slightly faster Josh Allen when it comes to mobility. But of course, he's not up there with like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels. There is a difference, but we got to stop acting like Drake May has no mobility at all. He's my third quarterback out of the three, but I just feel like he does receive a little bit too much hate, especially when it comes to the mobility side. But also, Kyler Murray, remember, was playing at an MVP level at a certain point, and their offense was literally top 5, but then they just kept having these situations where they would crumble towards the end of the season, and that's why that resulted in their seasons finishing like top 15 in offensive statistics. But at their best, they were top 5, and I'm more so blaming that on the O-line and Kyler Murray getting hurt more than anything else. But now let's dive into this offense that was voted by Pro Football Focus at the time the second most unique offense in the NFL, which I appreciate because that makes it harder for defenses to adjust to you and learn how to stop you. If you're the second most unique offense in the NFL, there's no, okay, we could use this offense. We practiced against them, or we played them last week or 2 weeks ago. So they're similar. So we know how to stop this. We already have an edge on going against that offense because we played a similar. No, that's impossible. When you're going against a Cliff Kingsbury offense, there's no other offense you can reference to prepare for that. You're starting basically from scratch the week before you go into a Cliff Kingsbury game. Basically, when you're a defense, you're hoping, you're praying for a bye week before you have to go against a Cliff Kingsbury offense, which has me very excited. And before we even dive deeper into the X's and O's as well, one thing I love about the air raid offense in general, but especially Cliff Kingsbury's version of it, it has a certain personality to it, to where they don't care how prepared you are for it. They don't care. Yeah, it's cute that you know what might be coming. You prepared all week for that, but can you out execute us? The air raid system is known for being practiced in a way that they practice the same select few things thousands of times over and over again, and defenses don't do that. They can't do that because they have to prepare for everything for the most part. So again, when it's Sunday, and even if you do know what's coming as a defense, how confident is said defense in stopping what Cliff Kingsbury's offense is running? It's an offense that literally prides itself on being very adaptive, even mid-play, which we'll dive into a little later, and also prides itself on not overlooking any details, no matter how small. So yeah, you can practice all week if you want to, but when we get on Sunday, are you ready to out execute us? Yeah, you can know what we're calling, you can be prepared and all of that, but are you going to be able to out execute us when it matters most? And that has to be so scary for defenses, to just, no matter what you know on the X's and O's, no matter what play call the defensive coordinator calls for you, the fact that you can still get beat just simply because the other offense is they're just so used to running this over and over again. It's literally second nature to them. What can you do at that point? The defensive coordinator called the right play, y'all were in the right places, and it still didn't stop the offense. That's very demoralizing, man. So I'm really excited about the personality and the attitude that comes with the Cliff Kingsbury offense, because that's the type of thing it does mentally to defenses. Now, of course, the air raid is also known as very pass heavy, but at the same time, I do want to point out the fact that Cliff Kingsbury used that to his advantage. Again, going to the adaptive part. And I believe he had like 2 seasons with the Cardinals where the team had over 2,000 rushing yards in a season each. So it's not, even though it's a pass heavy system, he will acknowledge the fact, well, okay, they're trying to stop the pass, so we're just going to run the ball. You're going to lighten up the box. We're just going to run the ball against you and see what you do against that. Because a couple of years ago, when their offense was clicking and they were going crazy, when it came to how many times they ran the ball against a stacked box, they were 25th in the NFL, only 18%. They were 61% runs against a light box, which was first in the NFL, like by far. Like, it was crazy. So defenses know that you're running the air raid offense. You want to throw it. Cliff Kingsbury is not afraid to just be like, okay, you want to lighten up the box? My quarterback has the power and the responsibility, the freedom to, at the line of scrimmage, see that y'all are all backing up, lightening up the box, running nickel, dime, whatever, or just having everybody play off linebackers 8 yards off the line of scrimmage and things like that. We're just going to, okay, we originally called a pass play, but let's just go ahead and run it and get these easy minimum 5-6 yards on you. So again, they ran the ball versus a light box more than anybody else in the NFL, which not only shows that defenses are afraid of their throwing ability, but also shows Cliff Kingsbury's willingness to be like, okay, you're going to give us that? We'll take it. And I really appreciate that. Also, you will be taking a lot of deep shots. This is an air raid system for a reason. You're going to be taking a lot of deep shots, and your receivers are going to be tired because they're going to be running a lot of deep routes. And with them running the most 10 personnel in the NFL, that of course lessens the importance of a tight end position on in this offense. We'll talk about that later as far as like tight ends go and everything like that. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of plays where it's 10 personnel, 1 running back, no tight ends, and 4 wide receivers. And he's also known to do bunches where it's like 3 wide receivers on one side, 1 wide receiver on this side. So now the defense is playing a little bit more off on that second side because they're worried about getting picked off and things like that off the bunch. The coverage is tighter on that side with the 1 receiver, and then the running back more than likely, more times than not, is going to leak out and run for a route than he is the block. So that's the basis of the offense for real. And tight ends, I mean, of course they matter. It's not like it's a position that's just going extinct in his offense, but man, they're utilized probably the least out of any team out there doing it. And when we're talking about 10 personnel usage, the league average in the 2021 season was 2%. The Cardinals ran it the most by far, 25% of the time. 1 out of every 4 of their plays had no tight ends on the field. Again, the league average was 2%. They were 25% in the 2021 season. That's crazy. The Bills were second with 12%, and I believe the Buccaneers were third at 4%. Like, that's insane. With Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator, tight ends will see the field the least by far out of any offense in the NFL. Just to go ahead and give you that heads up, which again, that's going to matter when we talk about stock ups and stock downs, about which positions matter the most in a Cliff Kingsbury offense. Of course, you can already tell tight ends are stocked down and receivers are going to be stocked up. We'll talk about that. And with as many receivers as that is on the field, so often out there around the same time, that means that Terry McLaurin will naturally see just more one-on-ones. With 4 receivers out there and a running back potentially also running a route for far more in the NFL than any other offense that's doing it, that means Terry McLaurin should see more one-on-ones, which is a good thing. Also, of course, his offense is very no-huddle heavy. He loves that, especially coming from the college level and things like that. Boy, that boy loves some no-huddle, because 2021, again, let's just refer to that system as well. When it comes to no-huddle, he ran it 28% of plays, which was the second most in the NFL. So, hey man, we gonna be no huddling like crazy, and that's gonna be pretty demanding on a quarterback, on the receivers, on the offense, everything just in total. But that's also going to be very exhausting for an opponent defense, which I'm pretty excited about. They're gonna be tired, man. They're gonna be tired mentally for the reasons I already gave you, and tired physically because of all of that no huddle. And also, of course, he runs RPOs as well. This is a very college-like offense, and Caleb Williams, coming from college, excels at RPOs because it causes defenders, especially linebackers, to hesitate, which makes things easier for an offense, especially a rookie quarterback. Because to be completely honest, man, the combination of air raid system and Cliff Kingsbury is probably the best combination for Caleb Williams to succeed and be NFL ready as soon as possible. It makes things so much easier for him to read and process compared to other systems, while also taking advantage of all of Caleb Williams' strengths, like his big arm, his mobility, his IQ, and things like that. So like, if you just say, if you're Caleb Williams from his point of view, what offense and offensive coordinator, if I were to go to the NFL, would give me the best chance of winning Offensive Rookie of the Year? Because I could come right out the gate winning games and looking really good, being productive, being efficient. You could argue it's Cliff Kingsbury and his air raid system out of any coordinator in the NFL. Even a lot of coordinators like Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay that you could say are easily better, or at the very least more proven offensive coordinators. But if we're talking about just pure X's and O's, strengths and weaknesses, what the offense prefers to do, what they prefer to hide and things like that, this system couldn't be any better for Caleb Williams. So from Caleb Williams' point of view, this is his favorite system to potentially be drafted into. And I love what Shane Waldron did for the Seattle Seahawks. He was my favorite defensive coordinator candidate. Now he's the defensive coordinator for the Bears, which could make Caleb Williams potentially being willing to get drafted to the Bears more likely with all of that drama that's going on. But even though Shane Waldron is a great offensive coordinator, and I think Caleb Williams could still succeed mightily under that system, you could get the most out of Caleb Williams in Cliff Kingsbury's air raid system more than probably any other system out there doing it. I'm telling you that right now. Even Andy Reid's system over there, what he's doing with Pat Mahomes, I think Caleb Williams specifically, especially if we're talking about day one, maybe not ultimately like down the line, years going on, long term, but short term wise, you want a system where Caleb Williams can step in week 1 of the regular season and put up 300 passing yards, 50 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. This is the system that gives you that best chance to do that. Just putting that out there. Also, this is a very big boom or bust system that requires a great offensive line, not just an average one, a great one. I mean, you need great talent just in general with this offense. We're going to talk about that a little later. This is not the type of system that raises the floor with poor talent. This is the type of offense that raises the ceiling of great talent. So you're very dependent on great talent, but at the same time, when you have that great talent, this is the offense that gets the most out of it. But O-line is probably the worst of all when it comes to that. Like, that logic of it's not a floor raiser, it's a ceiling raiser. The offensive line has to be good at worst, bro. First of all, his O-line splits are way wider than most. Like, offensive linemen are a little further apart in Cliff Kingsbury's offense. There's like bigger gaps between them. And again, when I do a film session, I'll literally show you on the screen. So of course, defensive linemen will adjust to you. And like, the 5 tech is still going to be on the outside shoulder of the offensive tackle no matter what. So even if he's further away from the quarterback, he's still going to be on the outside shoulder just by pure matchups. It's not like he's just going to go line up at a certain part on the field and then now our offensive tackle is further than him and he's not going to adjust. But at the same time, that means that, hey, that's cool. Now the edge rusher is a little bit further from the quarterback. That's a slight advantage there. But at the same time, now these gaps are way bigger for a potential blitzing linebacker, which is why you must have a very good and very athletic guard combo right there, especially interior offensive lineman and your tackle as well. So I think we definitely have that in Samuel Cosmi. Now, it's still a question mark whether we have that in Chris Paul or Sadiq Charles. I've seen flashes. I just haven't been able to see those guys put it together consistently enough. But that guard position, you got to be very good and very athletic. And your offensive line just in general has to be really good for you to be able to consistently succeed with those wide open gaps between each offensive lineman. Like going from tackle to guard to center to guard to tackle. It's just way more space in between. So I know a linebacker's like, ooh, this is my chance, man. This is the easiest gap to blitz through ever. And that's why you need the correct offensive line that has mobility, that has strength, athleticism, and arm length to get out there and stop that guy if necessary. And on top of all of that, even with all of that I just said, and why we need the offensive line to be great, to add on to that, his air raid system also runs a lot of 5-man protections, more than most systems in the NFL. There's typically 4 receivers out there, like I said, and a running back that's more than likely going to run a route than he is to even block. So now your offensive linemen are basically all on an island. There's 5 guys protecting, that's it. Maybe there's a tight end every now and then, but like we said, tight ends are utilized in this Cliff Kingsbury air raid offense less than any other offense in the NFL. So your offensive linemen are going to be on an island way more often than any other offensive line in the NFL, even more than we just did with Eric Bieniemy. There's literally going to be 5 of them versus whatever the defense is sending at you. Now, because of this air raid system, and they're just so afraid of you taking deep shots and abusing their linebackers and corners out in space and things like that, they're going to lighten up the box, and it's not even very likely that they're going to send a lot of people at you because they're afraid of getting beat deep for an 80-yard touchdown throw. But it's there. If you go against a defensive coordinator that's willing to take that risk and be like, man, you just going to have to take that deep shot. We coming at you with those big gaps, nobody else helping, no running back there, no tight ends, no nothing. We're going after your quarterback. That's when you'll have a situation where Cliff Kingsbury is going to have to adjust and figure something out. Also for quarterback, with all of those throwing options available every play, about 5 of them, including the running back, you need a smart quarterback that can not only read the field very well just in general, but he has to be able to read it pre and post snap, like to be able to go through your progressions. Caleb Williams has shown that he can literally do that at a very high level, which is why I would be so excited about this offense with Caleb Williams in it. And I think Jaden Daniels also shown the ability to do that as well. But man, you got to be a really smart quarterback. I mean, Mike Leach even said it, who's basically the guy that gets credited for this system, basically said like it's a love-hate relationship for quarterbacks, because if you're not smart enough to run it, you're going to absolutely hate it. But if you're smart enough to run it, you're going to love it, because it's going to be very complicated for not only you, but for defenses that you're going against. They're going to be befuddled all over the place, hesitating, not knowing what to do. And if you're capable of running that offense, you can use it to your advantage rather than it being a disadvantage against you. And again, a guy like Caleb Williams, I think, can do that. But he literally said, like, you need a quarterback that can take a snapshot of the defense pre-snap, and then based on everything that's going on, be able to just basically have that perfect photographic memory and adjust to that post-snap and make decisions. That's very difficult. There's not a lot of quarterbacks that can do things like that. That's not very quarterback friendly on that end. But again, a guy like Caleb Williams, who's literally grown up in that system and has learned how to play football through that system, if anybody can do it, it's him. Which takes me to my next major point as well. I feel like it's very important to dive into which position groups are the most prioritized to make a Cliff Kingsbury offense work. This stock up and stock down is not a representation of which positions will have it the easiest or which positions you'll potentially see like a spike in production and numbers. The stock ups and stock downs literally are just about which positions have to be good, great, or elite for this offense to work. So stock up basically means, yo, we need this position to be really good. If we can't, if that position isn't addressed, and if we don't have the talent for that position, this offense is not going to work. Whereas if it's a stock down, it's a position where like, yeah, I mean, maybe we can get to that. That would be nice. That would be like a cherry on top. But we don't really need somebody that's that great at that particular thing or position. Just to go ahead and give you an idea. So let's start with the stock down. So obviously tight end. Unless you have like a Brock Bowers type of guy, the tight end position will not touch the field as much as any other offense in the NFL. So especially like as far as being burgundy and gold fans, in my lifetime, we're going to see tight ends on the field the least probably ever in my lifetime. Which is interesting because Eugene Shin highly values the tight end position, especially dual threat tight ends. So maybe Eugene Shin can find the right tight end that can convince Kingsbury to use him more. But so far what he's shown with the Arizona Cardinals, he doesn't really plan on using those tight ends much at all. Now, of course, you still have to utilize tight ends. It's an important position in football just in general. But if you had to say which offense it was the least important in, it's this Cliff Kingsbury air raid offense. But either way, from history, tight end position is just devalued in his offense. So, hey, man, we're going to have to see what happens there as far as the draft goes, because we feel like we need tight end, but then you bring in a Cliff Kingsbury. Do you really need tight end that bad? Or can we just work with what we currently have, or at the very least sign like a decent free agent guy, maybe like a Dalton Schultz from the Texans, even though I see them doing whatever it takes to keep him. Also, power running back, definitely stock down. Definitely devalued in this offense, man. I mean, you're going to have to be a serious receiving threat, and even as a running back that carries the ball, the gaps between the offensive linemen are so big, it's not even like you need really great vision. You're going to run against light boxes anyway, so we need a guy that's really fast that can accelerate quickly. As soon as we run that RPO, the defense backs up. We need a running back that can take off immediately and go get the yards that we need, rather than a power running back that has great vision and knows how to shuffle through the blocks and find the right hole. That's not as serious. Now, of course, you hope your running backs have that no matter what offense you're running, ever. Doesn't matter which offense you're running, even this Cliff Kingsbury air raid offense. That's only an advantage that you have, but it's something that's not necessary for this offense to work out well. Also, tall wide receiver. I would love to get a tall wide receiver because we have none right now, but at the same time, it's not that serious. Cliff Kingsbury's offense does show evidence that he will throw it up to big receivers in contested situations, but it's nowhere near serious. He prefers running backs that can get open, especially with the route concepts he has, because he feels like it's more so his scheme getting receivers open than the receivers themselves a lot of the time. So being big and able to catch the ball over a corner isn't as necessary. Again, just like power running back, just like having a great dual threat tight end, it can only help if you have it, but it's not necessary for this offense to work. And then also quarterback without mobility and a quarterback with a weak arm, those just literally like that just can't work. The other things I would say are not necessary, but it would be like a nice addition to have that would add an extra wrinkle into the offense. But a quarterback with no mobility and a weak arm is literally pointless in this offense. Cliff Kingsbury might as well fire himself. Just quit if we don't have that. And luckily for us, at the very worst, we have Sam Howell that could do that. But I'm pretty sure we'll take a quarterback top 3, second overall pick, and we're probably going to get a guy that could potentially have more of that. So I'm really excited about that. Now let's talk about the stock ups. Again, these are the positions that are the most necessary for this offense to just keep working, to just be on schedule. I'm not even talking about maximizing the offense. I'm talking about for this offense just to even make sense, for it to even be functional. You have to have a great, but not average. When I'm talking about these things, these guys have to be really good. You have to have a really good receiving back. Super stock up on that. They'll be running routes more than they're blocking. So does that mean Antonio Gibson re-signing is probably a priority in the offseason if we hire Cliff Kingsbury as an offensive coordinator? Brian Robinson has shown that he can be a really good receiving back, but what would it hurt to have more than one? Especially with Chris. I mean, Chris Rodriguez is the type of guy that would go extinct in an offense like this. I'm not even gonna lie. Poor guy. He'll be lost in the sauce with the changeover going from Eric Bieniemy, Ron Rivera, and all of those guys to Cliff Kingsbury and Dan Quinn. He would be lost in translation. Also, smart, nuanced receivers, super stock up, because like I briefly mentioned earlier, they will have the freedom to adjust their routes in a play based on what the defense is doing with their coverages. And I'm going to do a super deep dive into that when we do like a full film session again, if we end up hiring him. But basically, like, receivers, based on what the coverage is showing, have the freedom to be like, okay, well, let me adjust my route. Instead of running 3 yards and then slanting, let me run like 1 yard and then just, or maybe the other way around. Maybe let me run 5 yards and then slant, because they're playing underneath, to give my quarterback a little bit more space and a bigger window to throw the ball. Those are the type of adjustments that receivers can make. Or with the mesh concept, you know, a receiver typically will run like 3 yards with depth. Maybe he'll come back a little bit more because he knows his zone coverage, and the defenders, especially the linebackers, are playing up a little bit more to stop that. So the receiver has the freedom to adjust the route a little bit. So you need smart and nuanced receivers. They got to be very smart. And then they also need to be able to separate if necessary. And then speaking of separation, we need speedy receivers, because this offense takes advantage of deep shots a lot. They love deep shots, hence the name air raid and all that type of stuff. Now, they do attack underneath a lot. This is not a deep shot only offense, but they love to throw it really far deep down the field. So you need receivers that can get open deep down the field. They're just in a straight line running a 9 route, can get open as consistently as possible. Also, you need a quarterback with serious mobility, because of the deep shots that this offense wants to take, and an offensive line that's on an island. Both of those, because with the deep shots, the defense is going to be backing up, so things are going to be open underneath. If you just want to run it yourself, you need to be able to run and slide, though. That's huge. We don't want you taking hits. You see how the Kyler Murray experiment with Arizona Cardinals didn't work out to his fullest capability, because he kept getting hurt, getting hit too much. So you need to be able to avoid getting hit. So, and then also with your offensive line being on the island, whether it's great or not, you need to be ready to run, because these guys don't have a lot of help. By scheme, by additional players, by a tight end being back there or running back being back there to help block as well. It's 5 offensive linemen, and that's it, no matter what the defense is sending at you most of the time. So we need a quarterback that can move so that he can avoid pressure and extend plays and go off schedule and take advantage of the fact that defenses are going to probably send a lot of pressure at him. So you definitely need a quarterback that has some mobility, man. You got to, man. And then lastly, of course, you need a quarterback to take advantage of those deep shots with a big arm, man. You need a guy with a big arm, man. I mean, nobody's even going to take you seriously. All of that underneath stuff that I'm talking about being open because of the deep shots you want to take, if you have a quarterback that doesn't even threaten a defense deep down the field, they're not even going to worry about that. And now, no deep shots, they're not even worried about that, no matter how fast your receivers are, and nothing underneath is open. All of those light boxes that I talked about, with they ran the ball against light boxes for easy gains because defenses are worried about all of that on the back end. If you don't have a strong arm quarterback, none of that's going to matter. They're not even going to leave those boxes light. They're going to stack them. And now you can't run the ball as easily as you would like to. So you need a big arm quarterback. And luckily for us, all 3 of these top quarterbacks, no matter which one, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, or Caleb Williams, all have big arms that can stress that. So I'm happy about that. So I'm just letting you know now, without all of those things that I just listed as the stock ups, the things that you need the most, this offense will struggle and struggle bad. These are the things that are necessary. Not, you know, it would be nice. Those are the stock downs. The stock downs, tight end position, a power running back. Yeah, that's nice. That's cool. But when I'm talking about these stock ups, the O-line, the big arm quarterback, the mobile quarterback, the smart, nuanced receivers, the receiving running back, all of that type of stuff, you need that for this offense to even make sense. For it to even be, I'm not even talking about great, for it to just be functional, you need all of those things. I just want to keep emphasizing that. And again, if we end up hiring Cliff Kingsbury, I would do a way deeper dive into all of that. This was like really my best way of consolidating a lot of information that I had into like the shortest form for now. I know I'm going into 40 minutes worth of video recording and we're not even done yet, but this was the best I could do to try to make a long story short, basically. And if we do a film session, expect that to probably run like an hour long plus, because there's so many aspects of this offense that are very interesting and very different from what we were doing with Eric Bieniemy and what we were doing with Scott Turner or anybody before that, Jay Gruden. This is a very different offense. Now to move on to Caleb Williams. First of all, you saw Kyler Murray playing at an MVP level under Cliff Kingsbury with this offense. Do you think Caleb Williams has the potential to be even better, but also more importantly, healthier? That's what things get interesting, because if you saw what Kyler Murray was doing playing at an MVP level at one point in time, I personally like Caleb Williams more coming out of the draft, and so I think you would get that same level of production, if anything, even more. And also, I feel like Caleb Williams could potentially be a healthier version. I feel like he would take less hits. He's not as fast as Kyler Murray, but also feel like he knows to take less hits and things like that. So I think he could maximize Cliff Kingsbury's offense even better than Kyler Murray did, to be completely honest. And of course, there's a strong connection between Cliff Kingsbury and Caleb Williams. Cliff Kingsbury was USC's senior offensive assistant last year. So I'm very sure that he would want to draft Caleb Williams. But again, he would come here to be the offensive coordinator and nothing else. So he won't have final say, or maybe even not even major say in who we end up doing, drafting with the number 2 overall pick, whether we take a quarterback, trade back, or whatever. But I'm pretty sure he's going to be banging on the table for a Caleb Williams. And also the Commanders hiring him would add a level of familiarity and comfort with the Commanders organization that isn't already there if we did plan on drafting a Caleb Williams. He would already have a guy in the building that he's worked with that knows his study habits, knows how to motivate him and things like that. So that would be pretty cool. So on top of the fact that Caleb Williams is probably already interested in being the quarterback for the Commanders just because this is the team that he grew up loving, on top of that, you hire Cliff Kingsbury. He's probably going to do everything he can on his end to let the Bears know, hey, don't draft me. I really want to go there now. Also, both Cliff Kingsbury and Lincoln Riley ran the same system that Caleb Williams ran last year. It would be a seamless transition going from college to the NFL for Caleb Williams. He would be able to walk in day one and be able to find success because it's literally the same system for like the vast majority of it. Again, Lincoln Riley being his head coach, but Cliff Kingsbury was there as the assistant, the senior offensive assistant. So I think that transition from Caleb Williams going from college to NFL would just be so smooth, man. I don't see how, from his point of view, he wouldn't want to. Also, with Caleb Williams being comped to Pat Mahomes left and right by everybody that's willing to say it, what better than to hire the coach that took the Pat Mahomes himself as an under-recruited high school player that barely anybody was up on, and took that very raw but talented player and turned him into a first-round pick before the Kansas City Chiefs even had a chance to touch him, before Andy Reid even had the chance to teach him a single thing, and took him. They did take him to the next level, but before he got to the Chiefs, it was Cliff Kingsbury that got Pat Mahomes to look good enough and to be good enough to be prepared. And again, Pat Mahomes was talented, but we're talking about X's and O's, nuance, IQ, awareness, all of that type of stuff that makes a quarterback great, not just a naturally talented guy with a high ceiling. Cliff Kingsbury is the guy that took that Pat Mahomes, that ball of clay, and molded him into a first-round draft pick. Now, of course, the Chiefs took him and made him into a league MVP, the best quarterback in the NFL. But who got Pat Mahomes good enough to where the Chiefs took him in the first round and had everybody questioning, why would you take a quarterback that raw, or that quarterback that nobody's really up on? Why would you take him in the first round like that? Who got him to the point that the Chiefs were like, hey, man, we see something in him? That was Cliff Kingsbury, man, and the rest is history. Also, remember, Caleb Williams wants to play back home in D.C. Chase Young didn't, along with the other players that are from the DMV area. Caleb Williams wants to. Like when it was first announced that Dan Snyder would have to sell the team, Caleb Williams celebrated in his Instagram story with "thank you" in all caps, like most of us did. And that's another thing. Several players from the DMV area grew up fans of other teams for one reason or another, including Chase Young. But there's no mistake in this one. Caleb Williams is definitely a Burgundy and Gold fan. He was super excited when Dan Snyder had to sell the team. So he clearly would love to play for his hometown team. Again, unlike a Chase Young who grew up, I believe, an Eagles fan or something like that. And it was reported after we traded him to the 49ers that he didn't even want to go back home to play. He preferred to play elsewhere rather than where he grew up. Caleb Williams wants to go back. And now trading up for Caleb Williams is tricky because when Cliff Kingsbury looked like he was going to the Raiders, people even talked about them potentially trading up for Caleb Williams, but they have the 13th pick in the draft. But we have the second, so I'm not saying it's likely at all, but I'm saying that you never know. The Raiders, there was talk about them trading up from 13th to first overall to get Caleb Williams just because they were potentially hiring Cliff Kingsbury. We're second, so it's more likely for us to happen than the Raiders. Well, I would say it's less unlikely because I still don't think it's very likely at all. I don't even necessarily think it's realistic to even hope for that, but you never know, man. And I also know that there have been conflicting reports about whether he's willing to play for the Bears or not. But forget all of that, Caleb. I'm talking to you right now, Caleb Williams. Go ahead and tell the Bears out loud. Just come out and say it yourself that you don't want to play for them today. Let's go ahead and do that tonight. Before the end of the February 3rd day, before the end of this Saturday, go ahead and come out and say that you don't want to play for the Bears. Do us a favor. Go ahead and pull an Eli Manning, and he got away with it. He doesn't even have that bad guy label. That doesn't even stick on him. A lot of people even forget that he did that, and a lot of other quarterbacks have done that before. So, Caleb, don't even worry about the bad guy label or none of that. It will pass over, especially if you start winning and things like that and balling out. If you really just go ahead and do your part we'll do ours by drafting you. I'm talking to you, Caleb Williams. I'm not playing with you. And then also, before we get up out of here, it says that the Commanders are expected to interview former Eagles offensive coordinator Brian Johnson for their offensive coordinator job as well. And they also emphasize that Cliff Kingsbury will be firmly in the mix as well. But please no Brian Johnson, bro. Cliff Kingsbury any day over Brian Johnson. You can easily blame him for the regression of the Eagles offense this past season. Please no. Commanders, brass, front office, coaching staff, Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, Eugene Shin, Josh Harris, all of y'all have to realize that Cliff Kingsbury is a better candidate than Brian Johnson. Please, man, you have to. There's no way you don't. So please, man, and that's why I'm just talking about this very briefly. I just wanted to mention that at the end of the video. We're not even going to do X's and O's on Brian Johnson because I just really hope that that doesn't happen. Now, if for some crazy reason we end up hiring him, then I'll do the X's and O's breakdowns and things like that. But for now, I'm good. I don't even want to even think about the chance of him being our offensive coordinator. Please go and hire Cliff Kingsbury, in my opinion. But yeah, man, that's the end of this video. Please get in the comment section. Let me know how you feel about everything discussed in this video. Please stiff arm that like button, stiff arm the subscription button, stiff arm the bell next to the subscription button so you get notification each and every time I release an informative and opinionated video just like this one. Make sure you stay tuned for everything. I really appreciate y'all. I'm sorry I'm coming out with this video so late. Stay tuned because if we end up hiring Cliff Kingsbury as our offensive coordinator officially and it's a done deal, be on the lookout for like a very long film session like video where I'm going to show you example plays, and when we're talking about weaknesses and strengths, I'm going to show you a play of why this is a weakness to his offense and a play why this is a strength to his offense. And the same thing with the stock ups and stock downs. I'll show you why tight end doesn't matter in his offense as much, but also why a mobile quarterback, a big arm quarterback, a receiving running back matters more in the Cliff Kingsbury offense. Again, I'll show example plays for those things as well. We'll show concepts, we'll show like X's and O's and things like that. So stay tuned for all of that. I really appreciate y'all. Stay tuned for any little update for the Burgundy and Gold. Again, I'm super busy, so I may be late with some updates, but I'm doing what I can. Stay patient with me. Appreciate y'all. Catch y'all later. I'm out.